Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because folks, life's too short to be miserable. Hello, Inspiring Possible people. Welcome back to another episode. Y'all know I've just been real fortunate lately. We have just had some incredible guests this year. And whether this is your first time joining or your fifth time joining or your 105th time joining, because I think we've had that many episodes at this point, welcome back. And I'm so grateful that you are listening today. You know, it's really an honor to be able to meet the different guests and people and hear their stories and their perspectives that are on this show. And today is no exception. I have a survivor, trailblazer, and a lifelong advocate for service who is a multi-passionate person that has successful careers in a lot of areas, but she has a story to share with us about what happens when life takes a turn for the unexpected. And then how do you reimagine what's possible after sometimes life just throws you a big old curveball? And if you're listening, I'm sure you've had a curveball thrown to you in your life that you maybe weren't expecting, and maybe you're in it right now. So stay tuned and keep listening because I know that you're really going to be able to get some things out of this conversation of how to reclaim life and find out what's next for you. And so I'm really excited to welcome Sheryl Ramstead to the show. Welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you, Christy. It's so nice to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you have a book, Living Life Full Throttle, but let's kind of talk about the origin of how this all came to be and a little bit about your journey.
Sounds good. Sounds good. The title stems from a turning point in my life, which was when I was 29 years old and a federal prosecutor. I'd finished law school. I was newly married. And I was, at the same time as I was working, I was pursuing flying lessons because my then husband and I had envisioned a life where he was a pilot. He'd been one since he was 16. And I was going to be beside him, and we'd
You're going
have
to be
this
his co pilot.
we'd have this lifestyle. If something happened to him, I'd be able to take over. So on July 7th, 1979 was the big day. It was my first solo. And for anyone who knows flying, a solo means that it's your rite of passage as a new pilot. You go through training, you go through ground school, and you go through a certain number of hours in the air with an instructor. And then it's your time to be able to fly it yourself for the first time. It's not the end of your training, but it's a real rite of passage to take over the throttle and be able to fly it yourself. The day was a beautiful sunny day, kind of like it is today. It was blue sky, 80 degrees. I had on shorts and a sleeveless top. And I went out with my instructor and did about 45 minutes in the air with him. And then he looked at me and he said, "It's time." And I knew what that meant. It was time for him to get out and for me to take over and fly the plane. When you do a solo, he'd explained to me, it involves 3 touch and goes. And what that means is you fly in a rectangular pattern. You fly up, down, around, and then back, and you touch down the wheels on the runway, and then you take off again. And you do that 3 times, but the third time you taxi in to the airport, and that completes your solo flight. So I was over downtown St. Paul, the Mississippi River, Interstate Freeway, and it was a really busy weekend. There were a lot of planes in the air. There were lots of cars on the freeway, as you might imagine. It was the 7th of July, a Saturday after the 4th of July. A lot of boats on the Mississippi River, and then the state capitol. First 2 touch and goes went beautifully. I was alone. I was confident. I had gotten my clearance to touch down, and I took off. And I just was cleared to come in for my final landing when all of a sudden the engine sputtered and then the engine quit. Dead silence. And, I had time for 4 communications with the tower. I said, "The engine's sputtering, the engine quit, help, and I can't stop it." It was about 20 seconds, the plane was dropping. Most people might think that the plane would glide, it doesn't, it just went down. And again, I was over this residential area, the state capitol, the freeway. Quite frankly, I didn't think I'd make it, but I didn't wanna take other people's lives if the plane
Mhm.
crashed.
Yeah.
Looking for a place to try to land it without jeopardizing a lot of other people. Well, on the way down, it was again falling quickly, and a power line tore off the wing, and that sprayed the whole cockpit with fuel, and the fuel tank exploded. So I was in an inferno. The plane was filled with smoke. There were flames everywhere, and then it came to a stop when it hit a tree, and I was only 10 feet from a woman sunbathing in her backyard. So that gives you an indication of how fortunate
Yeah.
I was that nobody else was hurt in this accident. So when I hit the ground, I first of all became aware that my body was still that I didn't have broken bones, and I tried to unlatch the door, but the doors had jammed, so I couldn't unlatch them. So I thought, here I am in a human inferno. I took all of my body weight and threw it against the door that was on fire, and tried once, tried twice, and it popped open. And so I climbed through the fire, got out, and there was a man from the neighborhood who walked over to me, and he said, "Is there anyone else in the plane?" And I said, "No, it was my first solo. What happened?" And he said, I don't know, but he said, I'm a commercial pilot, and I watched your plane, crippled plane, and I watched you land it. And he said, you did a damn good job of flying without killing yourself or others in our neighborhood."
Mm.
And then he helped me get across the street. And as fate would have it, across the street was a Catholic church. And so I collapsed on the sidewalk, and the priest came out and gave me last rites. And then the ambulance came and took me to St. Paul Ramsey Burn Center, where I spent the rest of the summer, had 37% of my body burned. The skin, they said, was just hanging off me. My hair was on fire, my arms, my hands, my legs, and 7 surgeries over the summer and the next couple years. A lot of physical rehab, learning to use my hand again. They were going to amputate this hand because, as you can probably see, it's wrinkly because it was burned right down to the bone.
Mm.
So they thought the surgeon thought he'd have to amputate it, but he knew I was a trial lawyer. And he said, I know new trial lawyers use their hands. And so he said, I decided to slap some skin on. Thankfully, it stuck. So I have both my hands. But when I got out of the burn unit, I couldn't bend my fingers at all. I was unable to really stand up straight. And it was a long journey back over a 2-year period. I had to wear a full body suit to keep pressure on the burns, which included gloves, long sleeve jacket, tights. Even in 80-degree weather, I had to wear those garments to keep the pressure on the burns to reduce the amount of scarring. So during the course of my hospitalization, I developed a complication, and the doctors had never seen that complication before. Basically, I'd gained 40 pounds and they didn't know what was going on. So the nurse called the head surgeon, and said, I think you need to get in here. It was a Sunday night, and he brought his surgical team together at like 10 o'clock at night, and they worked for 6 hours. They went in thinking it was an exploratory, and it turned out my intestine had burst, and I was full of infection. All my organs were infected, and he'd never seen it. He looked at the head resident, and they just shook their heads like, "We've never
What's
seen."
happening? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's so interesting too, because it's kind of like, what was it, maybe just like a delayed injury, or they still to this day don't know what really caused the rupture? Or?
Well, they opine that, I was a very active person. I was never never sedentary. I never sat still, never stood still, never laid still. And they thought maybe when I was on my back and unable to move for those, it was about 12 days, 10 to 12 days before this happened, that my intestine had an anomaly and it wasn't attached at one point where most people's are. And so it flopped over on itself. And that's what cut off the blood and the circulation and it killed the intestine and it just burst. And so they had to remove 18 inches of my small intestine. And then they gave me less than a 1% chance of surviving because here I was, the big risk with burn patients is that you're going to get infection. And
Infection,
here
and
I
you're
was.
what, like 12 days you said 12 days after? So,
Yes.
yeah. So even though the infection for the burn recovery was a good prognosis, it sounded like initially they were confident that they were maybe gonna be able to help you recover. It's the other having to and then I guess having to also do surgery that's I guess increases risk of infection, 'cause I'm assuming that some of these areas may have also been affected by the burn?
Yeah, they told me that afterwards that they worked for 6 hours, and what they did is they took all of my organs out of my body and
Oh, wow, that's real reassuring to know once you wake
yeah.
up, right?
Yeah, and had to, soak them in saline solution. Well, the truth of the matter is I didn't wake up for 2 weeks because they had me
Okay.
so heavily sedated and under such, strong medication to save my life that I was,
Mhm.
basically in an induced coma. So,
Coma, yeah.
um yeah, so, fortunately, the antibiotic took, and after they had told my family I'd be in the woods for 2 weeks. That's doctor's lingo for we don't know if she's gonna make it. And, my family was very, supportive, and I had a lot of, prayers being said, and I had, a good medical team. And, so when they sent me back to my room, I had an incision from my breastbone down to my pubic hair that couldn't be sewed back up because they didn't know that if they'd have to go back in and do more surgery, and so they had to leave it open so that, they had to pack it and try to keep it, again, from getting infected. It, they did a great job, and I was very, very fortunate to make it through that, and, but it gave me a long road back because I, had trouble standing up with this long incision. I had many, hours of therapy having to just hold a bar overhead to get my posture up to be able to stand, and then I had this hand that was, so badly burned, and so it was just a long road back.
Well, and what do you remember too? Because I know it's been a little bit. What do you remember about just kind of like your mindset of like here waking up maybe after that 2 weeks, coming to the realization of where you were at, what was going on, how long this recovery process is going to be, getting through the recovery. I mean, how did you keep going? That's my question, I think. Because, I mean, that's a lot. And now you're 29, about to be 30. So you're still, at the just starting. I feel like by the time you get to 30, you're like just starting adulthood. Like 20s is all about figuring life out. And then okay, now I'm really feeling like I'm a little bit more settled in who I am. So, what was all the things that you remember kind of going through your mind, and what helped you get through that long? Because you said it was about 2 years of recovery,
Right.
correct?
Well, you're right. It was a pivotal time in my life. I'd been married 3 years. My career was launched. I had a great job. I loved the trial practice. My husband and I were talking about starting a family. And so it was a major interruption, to say the least. And
Not in the life plan, is what I'm hearing. Not in the life plan.
not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
And,
And it sounds
I
like you're excited about, okay, I'm going on my flight journey. Here I am. I'm ready to, be able to take to the skies. And really, it sounded like they found out later what caused the issue was just engine failure overall. It wasn't.
yeah, it wasn't pilot error at all. In fact, the NTSB said that I was amazing given the limited amount of training I'd had that I was able to put it down safely and not
Mhm.
myself or others. So, uh,
Yeah.
that was the conclusion. What I did I was very fortunate. I said that I've also often said that there were 3 things that kept me going: my faith, my family, and my friends. Um, I had tremendous support from all 3, and my mother actually moved down here from North Dakota, moved into kind of a flea bag motel that was kitty corner from the hospital that was torn down shortly after she left, but so she could always be there, whenever she was allowed to by the hospital visiting hours, and she used to sit by my bedside with a legal pad, and whenever she had a question or whenever there was something that concerned her, she'd write it down, and then the next morning
Bless moms. God,
I
I
kn
mean, you know.
I know, and the next morning, in order to catch the doctors to be able to ask this laundry list of questions, she'd position herself outside the men's room so she could catch them as they were going in or coming out, and
I'm
they
seeing
would
where you got your these trial lawyer things from, okay? Did that come from your mom? She's like, "I'm gonna be there for my child, and I'm gonna help figure out what's going on, and if I have to corner somebody, I'm gonna get the question I need answered."
That is so true, Christy. In fact, she even asked the doctors if she could give the skin off her own body instead of having to take the skin grafts from my stomach and my legs, which is where
Wow.
they were taken. But when you're burned, your skin grafts have to come from your own body in order for them to take.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they're foreign and they won't take. So, but she was a medical social worker by background, so she knew enough
Oh,
to.
she knew enough to be persistent. Okay, I'm hearing you.
That exactly. Yeah, I just, everybody needs an advocate when they're hospitalized, and I surely did. I had the greatest advocate, my mother. Afterwards, I felt like it was really important to return to the burn unit to give back because I knew what it was like to be a patient there and how lonely and empty, and I was more fortunate than many because there were people from all walks of life, and some didn't have the support that I did,
Yeah.
and so I went back and worked there during my nursing. I went back to school to take nursing as a second career after I'd been a trial lawyer and a judge and run the prisons in Minnesota. When I
What
was in
prompted that change? What was it that kind of like you were like, "I think I'm ready for a different career path or a different adventure?"
it was it was the thought always in my mind that I needed to be at the bedside and help patients in any way that I could because I understood what few people do understand, and that's what it's like to be in
Mhm.
the skin and to have that sense of what this
Empathy.
in my future. And
Yeah.
so I always, I'd go over to the burn unit, and I had the doctor would call me to meet with a runner, for instance, because I was a runner, and just to encourage them to let them know that there was life after burns. And I was fortunate enough to have people like that come in when I was burned. There was a federal judge who would come in and told me that he had been swimming through a sea of burning oil and had burns all over his neck. Now, this man was a real hero in my professional life, and, that was encouraging to me. There was another person who was a Republic Airlines pilot who came in, and these people were encouraging. So I wanted to be at the bedside to help other people. And when I got in my late, mid to late 50s, I thought, how can I do this? And I found out about nursing as a second career. It was an 18-month program. I had to take all my prerequisites before I could apply. So over a 4-year period while I was sitting full-time as a judge, I took one prerequisite each semester, not knowing if I'd get in, but just feeling led to do this. And I
Yeah.
was accepted into this program at the University of Minnesota, and that really kind of tested my determination, my sincerity, my commitment, and I resigned my judgeship, and I hadn't told anybody I was taking these prerequisites. Didn't tell anybody when I resigned that I was going to go back to school, to college no less, for my nursing degree. But, it was something I felt really led to do, and I think that that was, um, just an inner voice that I needed. I'm a firm believer in to those to whom much is given, much is expected. And I was given a second chance. And I felt
Mhm.
like I really needed to help others who were going through it. So I started back to school when I was 62. And um, I didn't realize at the time that the University of Minnesota has a senior citizen discount. And so,
Oh, okay.
oh, I know if
What's
you're
the threshold for that discount? How old do you have to be at that
62,
point? Yeah,
62.
okay, so you had just hit it.
And I didn't have any idea, and so I'd paid for 3 semesters of college without any realization, and one of the people in the dean's office found out that I didn't take advantage of this and contacted one of her friends in the bursar's office. I got a refund for $22,000 because the credits were
Winning.
$10 a credit because I was a senior citizen. So,
Yeah.
I've let people know whenever I talk to people who are older and wanna pursue education that they can do so without going deeply in debt. And I was able to go on and get my doctorate then. And again, it was kind of a full circle for me because I requested to go back to the burn unit where I'd been a patient and, conducted a support group. And, we talked before about the people in that support group who felt like they'd come out the other side better off for their experience, but not ever wanting to go through it again. Well, one person I'd been helping was a man who'd been in an explosion of a gas can when he was mowing his lawn. And the support group had invited spouses, and he and his wife were there. His wife came up to me afterwards, and she said, "We know all about your plane crash." And I said, "You do?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "You almost hit our house." And she said, "We live in that neighborhood, and I was going to that church where the priest came out and gave you last rites. That was my priest.
Wow.
And my husband and I stood there beside him and said prayers for you." And then I
Oh,
found out I know, I
that's when
know.
you know it's a real circle moment, like, "Okay, I guess I am supposed to be here."
Exactly, exactly. Affirmation, affirmation.
Mhm.
So, I think that, what I did was not always obvious to myself even or others. For instance, when I had been out of the burn center for 2 years, I was wearing this full body suit, and I decided to train for a marathon. And the reason I decided to train for a marathon is that a nurse in the burn center had seen a picture of me that was up next to my bed in the burn unit. And I had been running Bonnie Bell. It was a race, 10K race, the week before my accident. And she said, In 2 years, you'll be running a marathon and I'll be there to cheer you on. Well, that stuck in my mind and it became a goal for me. So, on the burn unit, when I could finally get up toward the end of my hospitalization, I started using the exercise bike. Then, when I got out of the hospital, I found a friend who had given up smoking. So I figured she'd want to keep her weight under control so she'd be a good training partner. Well, we trained for months. And a year and 11 months later, I was crossing the finish line at Grandma's Marathon up in Duluth. Again,
Did she come with you?
she did. She did.
Yay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, she did. And, similarly, when a friend of mine, maybe 8 or 10 years later, said she was gonna climb Mount Kilimanjaro to raise money for Books for Africa, which is a program founded here in Minnesota that sends, surplus books over to African, countries that don't have books, and, so she wanted to help raise money, by going with the founder of this program on his 70th birthday, who was gonna give the 1 millionth book to Tanzania at the summit. So she said, "Why don't you join me?" And so I started training with her in this group, and, it was really, it was a long, hard, arduous journey, but it gave me purpose, and it gave me something to look forward to and something to train for and something to prove to myself and others, just like the marathon, that I was no longer somebody that had to be looked upon as damaged, or as, my burns were not my defining me. I was back, and my spirit was back, and I was, pursuing things that they could talk about with me other than my airplane crash and being injured. So I did climb Kilimanjaro, and half of our group made it to the summit. I was in that half, and
Yay.
I know,
It's better being that half than the one that's, really prepared to get there, and then for whatever reason, they just can't.
and that happened to my partner who recruited me.
Yeah.
That was a real crossroads. What do I do? But she would have wanted me to take
Keep
our
going.
car to the top. And quite frankly, if I hadn't persuaded her to go down and persuaded the Sherpa to take her down, she wouldn't have survived because she had
Yeah.
hypothermia, and her altitude sickness would have cost her her life. So when we got down, she thanked me profusely for sending her down. But,
Yeah.
she made it.
Thank you for being the friend that tells me don't go any further because I care
Exactly.
about you.
Exactly.
And I wanna when I come back down, I wanna see you here, please. Thank you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, those were things that I did, and other things that, when I had an opportunity when people approached me about running for county attorney, I had helped my brother, who was a US congressman, in his races, but I'd never been the candidate. However, the person who was running for that office had a head start by about 2 years, and, um, and I had a strong feeling that the position shouldn't go by default, that it was an important enough position that the public needed to understand what it entailed and who they were voting for, and it needed to be an informed vote. So I jumped into the race late, and, in a county that was, very politically not aligned with my politics, and,
Okay.
the person I was running against had a father who'd written for the local newspaper for years, a columnist, and so I went to I worked as hard as I could, and, came within a half a percentage point of beating her. So that led to my, getting asked by Jesse Ventura to serve in his cabinet as Commissioner of Corrections, because he had endorsed me and had seen me in a variety of debates, and we'd talked a lot about positions, and he said,
Sounds like senior tenacity. That's what I'm hearing, like the tenacity to just keep on going. I'm gonna keep
that's
going.
that's probably a good term. That's probably a good term. And so, and again, I had to reinvent myself. I mean,
Mhm.
I had high hopes of being the county attorney, and here I was, with a very public, defeat. I had to pick up the pieces, and it turned out to be a real blessing because I was able to do some things for our state correctional system that really moved it forward. And it's been ever since a real interest of mine. I right now serve on the parole board for the state of Minnesota. And so I have a real heart for corrections. And while I was commissioner, we founded the first faith based prison, which still exists now 20 some years later. So when those inmates come before me wanting to be released from their first degree murder convictions and their life sentences, and they say that this program was life changing for them, it really is affirming. It really is affirming that it was worth the effort and worth the time, and worth
Yeah, and
and
where you were supposed to be to help
exactly,
get that. Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, what do you think this, because it almost sounds like for you, this failure, burns, this thing that you kinda went on earlier in your adulthood really created, um, something within you to kinda like your book is titled, appropriately titled, Living Life in Full Throttle. What would you say to those listening that may be thinking, "Well, I don't know, I don't know exactly if I should be going in the same direction." What do you think are some things that has really helped lead you and guide you to where you felt the next step is for you? Because it sounds like you've had a varied journey that has had a lot of things that you've really been able to find meaning in through the different parts. Yeah.
And that was really my goal, is to find purpose. There was a reason that my life was spared, and, so I was on a quest to make my life purposeful, and purpose to me involved giving back to others. That was really important to me. Um, so I sought out opportunities by asking people, by observing, by praying to find out what the path forward was for me. And then when it came right down to it, I had to just look at some options and decide on the basis of my own knowledge of myself and my desire for purpose, if that was the direction to go. And I was very fortunate in that it became a very purposeful journey for me. I felt like I was able to give back, and like you said with the burn unit, it was a real affirmation when even now, today, 30, 40 years after I was on that burn unit helping people, I just ran into one of the people I helped at a burn picnic. And, there's just a bond there that would never have existed. So I know that I made a difference in people's lives. And that's really important to me. As far as writing the book, people would hear about my activities and they'd say, you ought to write a book. You've got a lot of interesting things. And I always would tell them, I'm too busy living my life to write about it. And it was true. It was true.
Yeah. I
I
love
was
that.
I was active professionally, I was active personally, I started my family, and again, my family was through adoption. We adopted 3 children, 2 girls from Korea and a son, and again, to give back, I, gave free legal advice for 12 years to the adoption agency that we got our daughters through, our children, 3 children through. I was pro bono legal counsel for them. And I had a very full life. So when it came time for me to leave the active workplace, my husband had some disabilities that required frequent trips to Mayo. I thought, if not now, when? And so I went to a writers' conference and I met a publisher and took the conference and I met an editor and worked for 2 years and got a writing buddy in Chicago. And, the result was, my book. And, originally it was intended to give um, my grandchildren an understanding of why my hand was wrinkled. And, they knew that vaguely why my skin was different, but they didn't really know the story. So they're young and, I didn't think that it was appropriate to tell them the details. So I thought someday they'll want to know. And, at the same time, it was my intent and my hope that I could inspire other people to look beyond what happened to them, what adversity they were facing, and not say, "Why me?" but "What next?" And that was a real goal of mine, to help other people, to inspire them. So, I set out to do that, and 2 years
And here
later.
we are.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, as you're saying that, my question that's in my back of my head is, well, what's next for you, do you think? Because I know you've had a lot of different things that you've been able to do and find purpose and meaning in, and we've gotten the book written, and so now that this book's out here, I'm just curious, what's next for you?
Well, that's a really good question, Christy, and believe me, I'm evaluating my options at this point. Um, I'm very dedicated to my family. I have grandchildren on the East Coast. I have grandchildren in the western part of the country. So I travel to see them at least every couple months, and it's really important to me to be a part of their lives. And I also am active in the parole board. I serve on that. That's a 4-day a month commitment here in Minnesota. And I'm taking a Bible study fellowship, and I'm part of, as I mentioned to you, the FBI Citizens Academy, which is a group of citizens that are invited by the FBI to learn more about the inside workings of the FBI. And it's a great opportunity. So right now my life is full of
It's
those things.
still full. It's still in full throttle, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
and as well as trying to encourage other people. It's that's what I really hope my book does. I hope that it and I'd love to have people who are at that crossroads or who aren't sure what's next. I'd love to be able to help. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I always answer my emails, and my email is Sheryl Ramstead author at gmail.com. And it's spelled SHERYL RAMSTAD. And my book is available on Amazon, Goodreads, and Barnes and Noble. I'm doing a lot of speaking appearances and some television, and I'm just. It's not about making money for me. It's just about helping other people and giving back.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like also helping them, provide hope that, no matter what situation that they find themselves in, that there is a whole life that can still be lived, and to use your words again, at full throttle, right? And whatever that looks like for them may be different. Um, well, Cheryl, and we'll make sure we'll link guys for y'all listening where you can get the book as well as Cheryl's contact information if you want to reach out to her. But Cheryl, I'm curious if you were to go back to some part along this journey, it could have been whenever you were in recovery from and working on your healing from your burns, or it could have been even before that, and maybe you were to give some piece of advice or a word of encouragement to younger you along the journey. Is there anything that you'd really have wanted yourself to know?
Again, I think the important message is keep going, look for what's next. Don't ask why me. Because I could have asked why me. Why did I end up with scarred body at age 29? Why did I end up having to wear ace bandages and having people stare at me? And yet I couldn't ask why me. I had to ask what next. And so I wanted to get back in the courtroom. The first place I went when I got out of the burn unit was I had my parents take me to the courthouse, and I walked into the courtroom. And so it was really important to me to look forward, not backward. Um, just as I think it's important if people um, are facing something that's hard or rebuilding their lives after a loss, I'd love to have them check out Living Life Full Throttle because I really believe it can help them find their own way forward. My way was my way, but they may have a different way. And I hope that this book encourages them to look for that way.
Well, Cheryl, I just want to take a moment to really acknowledge you for not only continuing to ask what's next, no matter what you've encountered in your life, right? But I will say to also really, it almost sounds like to me too that part of your faith has been integral in this journey of yours, and that you were always looking to find where you felt like you were supposed to be in that next season to be able to really be able to support individuals in different ways, whether it be on the parole board, whether it be in the burn unit, whether it be in the courtroom, whether it be in any of the areas that you've served in, whether it even also be just following your own goals and aspirations to marathon, to summit Kilimanjaro, to whatever that would be. Um, it sounds like you kept on pushing yourself to say, okay, I really want to be able to live life to the fullest. And so I want to acknowledge you for doing that. But you didn't stop there. Finally, when life slowed down just a little bit, and maybe not tons, you then said, okay, I'm going to write this book that people have been telling me to write. So you actually did what, maybe somebody said, hey, this would be a great idea. And you're like, it will be, maybe one day. And then you made it happen.
Christy, the interesting thing is there were all these pieces of my life that, you know, nobody understood. Maybe I didn't. But writing this book was like having the box cover to a jigsaw puzzle. You have all the pieces of the puzzle, but you don't quite know how they fit together. And writing this book really helped me see how this accident and this major event when I was 29 helped to shape my future. So it was a valuable experience for me.
Well, it almost sounds like it was also a gift, not only to other people, but to yourself to be able to have that real intentional. I think sometimes as somebody, it sounds like you are multi-passionate, living life at the fullest and full throttle. Sometimes for us, the full throttlers, and I'll put myself in the same bucket, it's hard to really sometimes reflect on like actually what really has these small little pieces, these small micro movements or moments that has then led me to where I'm at right now. And so it sounds like through the process, 2 years process of writing this, it also is probably a gift to you to be like, oh, okay, this is how I got here. And this is actually pretty incredible.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It was very rewarding to me, and I really was glad that I had, done so and that I did the, arduous task of working on it for 2 years, and I'm grateful for people like you that helped me get my story out and encourage other people to look at the possibilities in their lives.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, Cheryl, thank you for being a guest today. For those of y'all listening, y'all go check out that book. We're going to have it linked up, but Living Life Full Throttle by Sheryl Ramstead. And y'all go get your copy because I know it's going to inspire you. And if you've listened to some of these podcasts, y'all know that I give y'all a word or a thought that I'm taking from this conversation. And it's pretty much what Cheryl said a few times on here. And it's not necessarily why me, but what next? Life is full of possibilities, and your path has some possibilities in it too. And so be encouraged today. And I hope you have a great rest of the day wherever you're listening.
That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.